motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
The real exhilaration of riding your bike doesn't come from a straight road. It comes from hugging every corner, every twist, every turn, knowing when to throttle, when to brake, but all the while leaning into whatever's coming around that corner, trusting you're going to make it to the other side, even if there's a little fear in your belly. We know what's at stake every time we get on that bike. We may go down. And if we're lucky enough to live through it, if we do, then we need to make the decision, summon the strength, and find the courage to get back on the bike so we can have another ride of our life. Today's episode is Road to Resilience. Resilience is the capacity to recover from challenging times, or becoming stronger, wiser, or all around just a better equipped human because of them. On the show, we welcome our dear friend, Kim Okabe. Kim has fostered resilience throughout her life. She became independent at just 13 years old when she moved out on her own. Then, just 2 years later, at the age of 15, she attended college. Kim faced many challenging times in her life, one of the most difficult being the deep loss she faced during the sudden passing of her mom. Just a few short weeks earlier, she got her first motorcycle license. That first year, she put 32,000 kilometers on her bike, only to crush that with 52,000 the following year. Riding became Kim's therapy, her community and family, and has propelled her healing and resilience. She took over the Litas in Vancouver in 2019 and worked tirelessly with the Litas OG, empowering women around the globe to raise a little hell and ride. She rode from Mexico to Vancouver in 30 hours. She makes countless iron butt rides throughout the U.S. each year, many of which to Salt Lake City to the Litas headquarters. Also, just organizing and leading our local rides. This gal, she lives and breathes and loves riding. It's a part of her. My gosh, she even named her dog Harley. But riding has also tested Kim's comeback power. 2017, she went down. She snapped her foot. She spent time in a wheelchair and a long road to recovery, but that gal got back on her bike. Then 4 years later, this past summer, while en route to Milwaukee with fellow Litas, Kim went down again for a second time. She broke both her wrists. But as expected, this road warrior is already back on her bike. Life is about getting back on the bike. And for Kimmy, it's been both literally and figuratively. So today we're talking about Kim's experience of resiliency. What has kept her going when it would be understandable, very easy just to quit, make excuses, or just never try at all. But if you know Kim, that has never been and will never be an option. We're talking road to resilience. This is your motivation.
Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation because obviously I met yourself as part of Litas Vancouver, and you and I personally have known each other for a couple of years, but never really shared the space. Well, I've never shared the space to hear your story. And when I sent that little write-up, as we do for all our guests here, a lot of jaw-dropping moments. And when I look at all the instances that were just highlighted in your intro there, you're like, but of course she got back up every single time because you just have this tough as nails persona with this amazing heart that's layered inside of there. So when we talk about resilience, time and time again, you've just powerhoused forward. And without a doubt, I know that you've been an inspiration for our crew in Vancouver. And that ripple effect has extended because of the amazing journeys you've been on. You're a really well-known face and motivational person for many in the motorcycle community. But one thing that really staggered Lori and I was becoming independent and out on your own at 13. Because it's one thing to say that, but when we saw it on paper, all of a sudden you go, holy shit, that's a kid. So talk us through that experience, because I just can't even imagine at 13, I didn't know up from down. You're going through the heart of adolescence, trying to figure out life. So talk me through that experience.
Oh, God. I grew up in Prince George, and my mom, she was one of the most incredible people you'd ever meet in your life. And when you talk about resilience, I feel like I'm nothing compared to her, but she had it really tough. I lost my sister and I lost my brother, so she'd lost two kids, and my dad had left quite early. And I wasn't an easy kid at all. And she really had it tough. So basically when I was 13, I grew up really, really quick too. Like I think I was smoking when I was 8 years old. I was trying
Shock, I just
drugs
pictured it.
when I was like 9 and 10. Like it was, Prince George was just nuts. My friends were all older. When I was 13, I left and moved out on my own. I was dating somebody that was quite a lot older than me. And I quickly realized that I actually got put on independent living originally. And then I realized that I couldn't afford anything. So I quit school, got kicked off independent living, and just started working full time. And I worked full time for a couple of years. And when I was turning 50 and I really wanted to get my dogwood so I can go back to school. And it was just, I was kind of juggling 3 jobs at the time and trying to figure stuff out. And then eventually I went to Capilano, and they accepted me as a mature student because I had technically been out of school for 2 years. Wow. So I started going to Capilano when I was 15, and I was doing business and such. Started managing my first restaurant kind of illegally when I was 16, and kind of.
Was it a bit like you kind of learned how to hustle and where to look for resources that most young people don't have to?
Yeah, I think it's just, when you're in the situation, you just don't even think of anything else. You just got to do it. Right? Like you don't have any choice. You don't have any backup. Like at the time I didn't have a father that I was speaking to. My mom wasn't in a position. Like it was just, I had nothing else to fall back on. I didn't have any other family. So you don't really have a choice. You don't really question it, and it's funny because you don't even really think about it in that way until you're talking to people, friends and people like you in this situation where people are pointing it out and you're like, yeah, wow, that is kind of crazy. But at the time, and even up until you start talking about it, it just seems that's just life. It just seems normal.
Well, and especially at that age, it's all the things, like even as adults, sometimes individuals struggle with of where am I going to get my next meal? I need to have money to go places, and then dealing with the emotional side at the same time, where you're literally in the heart of adolescence, where all of a sudden you're just forced to grow up in a big, big way.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel to look back on that time now?
I don't know. It's pretty wild. Obviously, we'll get into it later, but I remember when I got into my accident, and it wasn't my fault. It was obviously the left turner in front of me, but it was an ICBC case, and I did end up going to court. And then, of course, the lawyers just want to rip you apart. So you have to detail your entire life story for the opposing counsel. And so basically they can pick you apart. And I remember the other lawyer basically almost calling me a liar on a lot of stuff because they were like, what are you talking about? Like this, there's no way.
Like there's no way.
No, this didn't happen. But then on the other side of it, it was just, you would tell that part of it and they're like, so you didn't graduate is what you're saying. And you're like, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what you know what I mean?
But you're like, I have way more life experience than you could ever fit in the palm of your hand. But cool, bro.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah. It's pretty funny.
Well, you talking about looking back in that time with the motorcycle accident. So let's reverse to you getting your introduction to bikes. How did that all begin for you?
Oh, my mom, she's always into bikes. My uncle, her brother always had Harleys in his garage, and she kind of grew up around them. And she used to just kind of be on my case all the time. Like we were so similar. She was literally my best friend, and she lived out in Abbotsford, and she would come over for sleepovers all the time. And she would just be on my case about like, I know you, and I know how much it changes your life to be on a bike. And I know that it's going to change your life, and you need to do it. Like it's just being on the road solo and having the wind in your hair. And it's true. Like I understand now where you just like can't really put it into words, but you're just like, I know that you need this. And she was just always kind of poking at me. And, I've kind of dicked around on dirt bikes and done a lot of stuff, but I never really got serious about it. And one year she was just absolutely on my case. I remember it was kind of like around Christmas time, and she was just like, just going. I was like almost sick of it. I was like, okay, mom, like stop talking about it. January rolls around, same thing. February. And then I was just like, fine. So I got serious about it. And, when I want to do something, I just want to do it right away. So I think it was like 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks at that time, when you can actually get in and get your L and get your license and all that kind of stuff. And I bought a bike first, of course. So I bought a bike then I scheduled my test, and then I took a course and did everything. And then, I got on my bike for the first time, and it was scary as hell. And, but the course obviously helped a lot. And it was just a few weeks later, that she went in for a routine surgery. I was waiting for her outside. She was supposed to be in and out an hour and a half. And they called me and they said she's on life support. And I was like, no, she is in the recovery room. Like there's absolutely no way. This doesn't make sense. And it turns out the surgeon had botched the surgery, and she had some bleeding in her brain that they didn't notice. And by the time they noticed, there was so much blood that her eyes were basically, it was bad. So she was on life support, and by 10 a.m. the next morning, they took her off. She was brain dead. So at the time, it was pretty incredible. I had been managing a restaurant for 13 years, and a friend of mine owned it. And, everybody there basically was just like, don't be here. Don't show your face. We don't need to hear from you. Just do what you need to do. And the only thing I can think about doing was getting on my bike. And I didn't pack. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know anything. And I just got on and I just rode, and I cried, and I yelled and screamed, but I just kept riding and pretty much didn't stop. So that definitely became my therapy and my road to therapy. It was kind of the only way I felt like I was with her, the only way that I can talk to her, the only way that I can scream at her sometimes.
Like
There was almost like an intuition. Like
yes.
that's all I could think about was like, it was like this motherly intuition where she was like, you're going to need this.
I was going to say, like, my mom, I don't know if it's just all moms or I'm sure it's all moms, but they just have this weird
Yes,
intuition where there's sometimes that you're just like, what are you? It was just, it's pretty nuts. So it's funny though, because there's so many little things like that it kind of happened. It was almost like, thinking back on it now, like it was almost like she knew that something was happening, because there was little things that she did to kind of set me up that after the fact, I would look back at it and just laugh and be like, are you kidding me? Like it was kind of a tough situation, but she had gotten scammed. But those scam artists that'll call your house and say, oh, you want a car and you just got to pay these import fees and this, that, whatever. And so I guess that had been going on for, I don't even know how long. By the time I got involved, she basically was 800,000 in debt and was losing her house. And she was like, she was so far gone. It was pretty crazy. But I remember like it got to the point where I was going out there every couple of weeks just to buy her groceries, because I knew that she wasn't buying anything. She wasn't eating properly, and she really had no money. And I remember at one point I went to her and I said, I got to her house and she goes, I bought you something. So what do you mean you bought me something? Mom, I'm coming over here to buy you groceries. What the heck are you doing? She's like, Kim, I was walking through this place and I saw this picture and you just had to have it. And I was like, first of all, we talked about buying stuff from my house. You don't do that ever.
I got a particular style.
And she just kept saying, she said, no, you know what? Your brother was talking to me and your brother was saying that you need this. And it's his message to you. Like, you need this picture. And it was wrapped in this paper. And I was just like, oh, for God's sakes. Like, I took it and I was frustrated and I threw it in the back of my car. And I was like, thanks, but like, please stop buying me things. I don't need anything. I love you. You're amazing. She was like, I had to do it. Your brother told me to. And I was like, okay. And, fast forward 3-4 months later, I had gone to her house to clear out everything. And I was taking all of her stuff to the downtown Eastside Women's Shelter. And I had a car just packed full of all of her clothes. And I was in the back of my place, just kind of organizing everything and spreading it out. And I'm just bawling my eyes out. And I'm by myself. And it was just like so horrible. And I take out the last item and there's this freaking picture and it's wrapped in paper. And I'm just like, oh, for God's sakes, this gift that my brother, and I was just like, this is unbelievable. And I took it out and it's a picture of an eagle and it has a poem on it. And it said, if you could see me now, sorry, said, if you could see me now, you wouldn't shed a tear, though you may not understand why I'm no longer here. remember my spirit. That's the real me. I'm still very much alive. I wonder if you could only see. I've beheld our Father's face. I've touched my Savior's hand. The angels all rejoice as I entered the promised land. Beyond the gates of pearl, I walk on golden streets. I've touched the walls of jasper, dipped my foot in the crystal sea. The beauty is beyond words. Nothing can compare. It's even seen in your mansion. Someday I will meet you there. Allow Jesus to be your guide. His words will show you the way. Please don't cry. We'll meet again someday.
Wow. I'm just bawling my eyes out over here.
Yeah, me too.
But
That's
it's
so
crazy 'cause
incredible that she gave it to you, and then like months later when something all of a
Wow.
sudden transforms meaning. What a gift, Kim.
she bought it thinking like, hey, your brother, this is your brother talking to you. And it,
Oh, I feel like the universe works on another level in those moments, truly.
yeah. And I just remember just like that. I felt like that was probably one of the worst times in your life where you're just kind of, you know, you're going through stuff being like, just power through it. You know, you gotta, you gotta give these clothes away and it's going to be good. And it was just, yeah. And then it just turned into one of those moments where you almost laugh. You're just like, God, that woman, you know?
Well, and especially like anyone that's ever had to go through that, like it's one of the most painful experiences when you're parting ways with, especially when it's like articles they've worn and it smells like them. And just thinking of you with everything you'd already overcome and then standing in that moment, like obviously donating to a really worthy cause and probably in that moment, and I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine it felt so heavy and alone. And then to all of a sudden have that incredible reminder in your hands, you must have just been blown away.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was incredible.
I love that.
I think that's still so much of that resiliency within those moments is like,
yes,
you know, where you're saying, oh, I've got to power through this and I've got to make it through this. And then I have this moment where you almost like laugh at it. But really, like, isn't that part of it too? Is that where you're able to like be fully in that moment and allow it to even overtake you in that moment. And then when you've fully gone through that, like the deep heaviness and the deep kind of awe of it all. And then you're like, and then you get up and you keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Not even just like get up and go, like you get up and you kind of you just propel forward.
You're better because of it.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. And it's also funny too, because I'm not even really religious, but she was, and I had this big thing on my wall and everybody walks in, they're like, oh, I didn't know. And I'm like, no, you don't.
You should just start leaning in. Yes, please do 3 berries before you enter my living room. Thank you so much.
You're not going to eat that before you pray, are you?
So Kim, how do you feel like after your mom's passing, you know, we spoke about how you took those, you know, you just took to the road, everything else kind of leading up and then finding this kind of new form of therapy, if I'm can, you know, say as such, all of that, or I guess even your previous life before that, because sometimes it's a bit like that, where there's like chapters of before and afterwards of like, how did that previous experience of resiliency help you and the bike and everything move you through to such a big loss in your life?
I just remember, like, I remember thinking, like, you know what, with everything that has happened, the last couple years before that, there had been a lot of like fentanyl overdoses and stuff. And I'd lost a lot of people that I've known and gone to school with and such. And I just remember it was just that one thing that you're just like, it was just that straw that broke the camel's back, you know? And I remember after that happened, I was like, I can't do this again. Like this is it, you know, there's a lot of things that have happened and I've persevered and I've gone through it, but holy shit, this is it. And it's funny because you're also still kind of in shock. Like, I don't think I cried other than like those moments where you're going through clothes or things like that. But like actually like just seriously mourned her, I don't think I did for 6 or 7 months kind of thing. Right. Like, and I'd always be like, what is wrong with me? But I think in my head, it was just like, okay, yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's just, you know what I mean? Like,
If I feel it
just
all,
go
I
through
may
this.
not get back up. That whole like,
Yeah.
this might take me out. I may not survive this because this is a
Yes.
whole new level of deep despair and grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just hits different, you know? But yeah, obviously everything leading up to it is just you've developed a lot of coping mechanisms which help you. And then there's certain things where you're just like, everything's out the window. I don't know.
What were some of the coping mechanisms that did help you in those moments?
Well, other than the bike, I would say babies and ocean were my two things.
I
There's
hear
something
that.
about, yeah, there's something about being by the ocean and being in water. I do a lot of cold dips and stuff. And the ocean just kind of reminds you that you're just so small in this world and it's just so powerful and so incredible. And I don't know, it just reminds me that the world is such a bigger place. And when it comes to kids and children, and thank God I had a new niece at that time, or goddaughter, but I don't know, just being around babies and children just reminds you that life is going to go on and it's going to move forward. And, you know, people are going to pass away, but there's a lot of incredible people that are going to come into this world. And I kind of just focused on being there for those little people and wanting to make them good people, good souls, you know?
Oh, you got me all in my feels.
You know, whenever you go through something, whether it's a loss or an accident or something, whether it's weeks or months, it's almost everybody you come into contact with are not at fault, but you know, they're always very empathic and how are you doing and how are you feeling? What can I do for you? This, that, whatever. So I think one of the reasons why it's kind of a fresh breath of air when you get around children is that they don't know anything and they are the only people that don't see your pain and they're just happy and they're just living in the moment and they're doing their thing. And it's just kind of, like I said before, it's just a bit refreshing. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I kind of gravitate towards them.
It's something you and I bonded very early on, and was that, you know, sometimes when you're the people that everybody kind of goes to for advice or goes for strength, if you will, at their harder times. And then sometimes if you show up in your vulnerability, they don't really know what to do with it. And I never thought of it until this moment, until you kind of spoke to your gravitation towards children, because obviously I have that as well. And then when you said that about they don't ask too many questions and they just are, and they're just like experiencing it with you versus trying to necessarily figure out how to show up for you. They just kind of are. And I was like, isn't that perceptive in the sense of makes sense of why we gravitate towards kids? They're just like, you look like you need a hug. Do you need a hug? Sure do. Okay, let's go play. Okay. Like, it's that simple. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, undeniably, through everything in your journey, I mean, you have proven to be a tremendous inspiration in the motorcycle community. I actually can't imagine a version of you not on a bike, and that it's so obviously meant to be a part of who you are, and obviously a really meaningful and impactful thing. So talk to me a little bit about how the journey progressed, because you've since then become heavily involved, not just with the Litas Vancouver, but the Litas overall, and a massive role model for women around the globe.
When I started riding and really kind of got on this journey, the way that I got into it and the reason why I was doing it, it made me a very, very, very selfish rider. I had no interest in riding with other people. I had no interest in, sharing my journey. It was the only time that I felt that I was connected with my mom. And it was the only time I felt that I can really just kind of breathe and, cry and yell and just go through all the emotions, but then also to still be right in the moment and not be worrying about what's ahead or, thinking about the past. And it was just like, it was my me time. And I did start going out to things like I would be like, I'm just going to go out to Babes Ride Out. And I would rip down to California in October and just show up at Babes Ride Out. And I met some absolutely incredible people. That's where I met Jess and Red and all these great gals. And, we'd keep in touch and say, hey, like, I'd love to see you again. And if anything comes up, for me, I was just kind of like, I need to get out of the city. I need to get out of the city. What's going on? They're like, okay, we're going camping in Moab. I'm like, okay, I'm coming. And I would just kind of rip down there. And so that's kind of how I met that crew. And, of course, Jess started the Litas, and we travel all over the world and meet all these different branches. And people are always like, oh, you must be Litas Vancouver. And I was like, no. I just, for me, I was also too one of those people that I'm like, I didn't have a lot of female friends. I didn't feel like I could connect well with females. So it was like I had a lot of guy friends, but thinking back on it now, I think that was also me having my guard up too, because I knew that I couldn't get really deep with a lot of men. So I had a lot of surface friends, and that was safe for me, and that was okay. But yeah, it was just kind of, I love going out and traveling and seeing these people, but to actually like have to ride with a bunch of women all the time and, be in a group, I was selfishly kind of in my own head, and I had my own journey in mind, and I just didn't want it to change, and I didn't want to have to share that with anybody. And and we just kind of kept going out and meeting more people and meeting more women. And then eventually I was like, you know what, like this is really incredible, and like we kind of really need this in Vancouver. Like going out to all these places and seeing all these women, I'm like, we have a way bigger community there. Like I know there's way more bikers there. And so I came back home and figured out what was going on and ended up taking it over. Jesus, the rest is history. You guys are incredible. It was,
now we've got a family.
It was like, just incredible. Like,
right?
I think, meeting everybody and riding with everybody, and I can't even explain it. I don't even know how it happened. But the one thing that I did really realize was that, holy shit, when I actually opened up my world to other riders, I felt like such an idiot, because I realized that almost every one of these other people had a similar story or have been on a journey running parallel, and it led them to bikes as well. And there were so many people that I was riding with that was just like, we were all on this healing journey together and we didn't even realize it. And, I had been pushing it away for so long that I was just like, holy shit. And there's stories out there that are way worse than mine that I'm just like, what kind of pity party was I running? Like, are you kidding me? And anyways, it just kind of, we developed these quick bonds that, it's really hard to explain. I know that I remember when we did the first couple meetups and something would happen in my life, and I'd only met you guys for, a couple weeks, but if anything happened and I needed to talk to somebody, I wouldn't call my best friend of 10 years. I would pick up the phone and call one of you guys and say, hey, do you want to go for a ride? And immediately it was just like, yes, let's go. And, whether we immediately talked about it or came out after, it was always just comfortable. And we had this like unspoken understanding of holding space for each other. I'm so thankful for you guys, and I'm so thankful for what the Litas has kind of brought us, and motorcycles and everything. So
I double down on that without a doubt. It's been absolutely life-changing. Do you feel as though that community or our community, I guess, if you will, really has really amplified that resiliency for you? Or has it been something where you have felt maybe the opposite, where you felt like you haven't had to be so internally resilient because you have a bigger cushion to land on at times?
Yeah, you kind of nailed it right there. It's funny because we don't really have to tell our exact stories. Like there's a lot of you that we really kind of, we had this really close bond, but like Christy just said, like we've known each other for a couple of years. We really have never just sat down and said the story, but Christy and I have always kind of had this understanding where it's just like, we know that we've gone through things, and we know, and we would pick up the phone and call each other in a heartbeat and wouldn't even think twice of it,
There's just some unspoken understanding and support. And it's hard to even put it into words, quite honestly, because it's just one of the most powerful, unexpected things that I actually didn't know was possible in this phase of life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I've heard in that from kind of just the both of you talking, and my own experience within it? But as you get older, and your resiliency can change as you start to have more choice in your life, and as you start to decide what it is you're going to let, steer you. Is it fear or is it love? Is it going to be openness? Is it going to be closed? And a lot of times when you're just trying to survive as a young person, or trying to figure out your stuff or your story, and you're trying to, figure out who's the good people and who's the not so great people. And your resiliency sometimes can come out of survival. And as you grow older, and this sounds like a lot, Kim, for your story, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your resiliency is still very much there, but you're able to do it in a way that is out of thriving, that is a way isn't out of just like survival, or because you have no choice, because you have all these choices. You have, you do very well for yourself. You've got, a dope ass apartment. You've got incredible friends. You have a job that you thrive in and love. You've got all these incredible things, but you're still crazy resilient, like hopping back on your bike because you're just like, yeah, I just resolved, like, I'm going to do it. That hasn't changed. But you, rather than it's about survival, you've shifted into a different part, no pun intended, into shifting into thriving in a resilient fashion. This is just something that like, it just kind of, that's what I'm hearing.
Well, it is, but also too, like, and you guys can all relate because we've just been talking about this, but my bike has turned into so much more than a motorcycle for me.
Yes.
And it's funny because the question that you always hear when you get an accident is somebody goes like, "Oh, are you going to ride again? Are you going to get back on there?" Like it's just over and over and over again. But on the other side of that, I'm the community director for the Litas International, like globally. And you get a lot of people that will write in and ask you, like, I'm terrified to go on a bike. Do you have any suggestions for me? Like, I really want to ride, but I'm scared. And I don't know if it's just me being jaded at this point, but my first question is always like, why do you want to ride? Like, tell me why you want to ride. Because for me, like, it was never even a question. And the drivers in Vancouver are horrible. They're probably some of the worst in the world. And it is very, very dangerous, but no matter what happens, I will never question it because of how I got on and because of what it's doing for me and my soul. Like, I need it. It is a part of me. But riding is scary. It's a very scary thing. And if you're scared initially going on to it, then you need to have something very strong propelling you from the back as a reason to really push through and get into it. But if you don't have that, it's hard for me to be like, yeah, no, you should do it. Like, if somebody's just kind of like, I'm scared to get on a bike, but my friends ride and I want to ride. And I'm like, if you're scared, don't do it.
Meet them
if
for
you're
coffee.
Scared and the only reason why you want to ride is because your other friends do it, don't do it. And I'm, as a community, like, I'm probably the person that's should be the one that's like, yeah, everybody get a bike, you get a bike, let's all go. But at the same time, I'm just like, being scared and being on a bike is one thing, but you got to have the grit, you got to have the confidence, you got to have it in you to kind of push past a lot of these things and to stay on and to make everybody safe and to like, you'll get past it, you will, but
yes,
it'll take some time. And I hope that you have a reason to get on a bike other than looking cool or because other people are doing it. Essentially, I don't want to push somebody that doesn't have one of those reasons, and then something happens and they're like, why did I do that?
Well, and it's such a fair comment because it's honestly a metaphor for life. Like, we say it on the podcast all the time as well. Like, you have to have your why and be centered in that.
Do you guys ever find that you'll be riding and like all the goals that you have that have nothing to do with your bike, but just in life, and you're like, I'm not scared of any of them anymore and I'm going to conquer them all. And then like I get off my bike, I'm like, oh, they scare me again. So like, ironically, being on my bike, which should be the scary thing, you know what I mean, is like the thing that makes everything else seem not scary at all and so doable. And then, so like, to get my amped up about something, I'll go ride, come home, and then like make whatever commitment I need to follow through with that thing. Because I'm like on the rush of being like, I can do anything.
Yeah, using all the batteries charged. But on the note of that fear, like, I mean, the level of resiliency times 1,000, because you had some pretty scary experiences on your bike. So talk us through the first round that was obviously detrimental to your ankle and then also landed in having to deal with tangles of legal for years on end.
Goodness. I was in what was it, April 2017. I was managing my restaurant in Kitsilano, and it was probably 10:30 at night. I was just on my way home. But it was one of those typical things. So there was the person in my left lane was taking a left, and in the same intersection coming down, they were taking a left as well. So there was two people taking left turns. I was just going straight through, and the person oncoming decided to take the left right in front of me. I had all the room in the world to be able to kind of swerve around and go around him, but it was a big Lexus SUV, and the person in the passenger seat looked at me dead on coming straight for them and just screamed. Like, I could hear her through the vehicle. She screamed, and he slammed the brakes on. So I was driving pretty much in lane 3, so closest to the parked vehicles. So the other person, so originally he was able to see me when I was going straight, and then I wasn't able to swivel through. So he slammed on the brakes, came to a dead stop. So I slammed my brakes on, and I fishtailed my bike as hard as I could. And I slammed the side of their SUV, and the floorboard snapped my foot off. And I was able to keep my bike up, and then I smacked the back of his vehicle to just keep going, like get out of the intersection. And I was going quite slow. And there was a guy on a bicycle. Everyone heard the impact, but they didn't really know what was going on. And there was a guy on his bicycle that was just kind of walking on the sidewalk. And I couldn't stop because I looked down and my bone was out, and I looked down. I couldn't see my foot at the time because it was completely underneath. And I was like, I can't stop because if I go to the right side, I'll completely fall over on myself. So I looked at him and I said, he's like, are you okay? And I said, come grab my bike, come grab my bike. So he came over and he's like, what do I do? And I said, just bear hug my handlebars. So he bear hugged my handlebars, kept it straight up. And then I was able to kind of fall over to the left side. And then that's when I realized it was still on. It was obviously just kind of hanging on. But yeah, that was pretty much it. And they came around, and God, I felt so bad. The girl was 15 years old. It was her mom's SUV. Her boyfriend was driving it. He was only 16. And I remember her coming around the corner, and she was just screaming. And I kept looking at her, and I said, honey, it's okay. Like, it's an accident. Like, it's okay. And the fire department came, and they couldn't really do anything for me. I was just begging them not to cut off my favorite pants because God, I love those things. And I just remember I was like, you need to I'm fine, but like, you need to go tend to her, because she was just almost hyperventilating. Like, she just felt so bad, and he was yelling at her. It was tough. I snapped my tib fib. I got a couple plates and a bunch of screws in there. I went into the ER on Friday, and I think I woke up on Sunday. It's actually crazy though. We went into the examination of discovery. This was probably like a year and a half after I got in the accident. And it's basically when you sit down with your lawyer across the table from ICBC lawyer and, the kid that was driving. And we went through the whole thing where basically she grills me, makes fun of my non-education, and then, and then, the opposite. But in between, they take a little break, and the lawyers kind of step outside, and I sat across the table from him, and he was only 17 at this point. And I looked at him and I was like, hey, I want you to know that I'm not mad at you, and that it was a mistake, and that I'm fine. Like, look at me. I'm like, I'm totally fine. And he just started bawling his eyes out. And he was like, I never told my mom. And I was like, what? He was like, I never told anybody. And I was like, oh my God, kid. Like, he's just been going through this alone and so worried. And yeah, and we were like, I just
that's
came
heavy.
on the table, and and I hugged him, and we cried. And my lawyer walked into the office, and he's like, what the hell are you doing?
Especially ICBC was like, fuck.
Oh my God. He's like, you this side, you that side. What are you? And I was just like, don't start with me right now. Anyways, yeah, it's pretty funny.
So obviously you had a recovery to go through, but clearly got back on the bike. So how long was the in-between, and what was that first ride like? Because we know a lot of people, like, that's a big decision. It's a huge decision.
It was 4 days after I got home from the hospital.
Oh, right.
Okay,
I forgot this part.
Okay, let me explain. So because the accident happened 4 blocks from my house, I'd only gone out a couple times for something, but I remember driving up Main Street, and I remember going through that intersection, and it was almost like, you were just on one of those rides where you just got dropped and my stomach would just jump up into my stomach and I'd almost choke on it. And it doesn't matter how fat we were driving. We'd be driving 20 kilometers, we'd be driving 80 kilometers, doesn't really matter. And I just remember my stomach, and I go into the intersection being like, don't do it. It's fine. No big deal. Nobody cares. And whoop, stomach will go up. And I'm like, oh God. And I got home after that drive the second time and I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not losing this. And I had an air cast on at the time. I had a full cast. I don't remember what I did. Oh, I had an air cast and I put it over my cast and I just duct taped the shit out of it. And then I went down to my bike and I had a cane. I remember I had a cane and I jumped on my bike, and the cane was, so I thought that I was like, I'm not going to stop, and I can only stop if I am near a wall, and I put the cane up and then it'll just protect me from falling to the right. And I drove around that intersection without stopping, just over and over. It was probably like a 5-block radius, and I just kept driving around and around and around in circles. And I did it until my heart stopped jumping, and I did it until I can just breathe through it. And I just kind of like tried different breathing techniques every time I went through, and I held my breath sometimes and I got really dizzy, and then I breathed really fast and did maternal breaths. And then I just, and then I just kept doing it, and then it stopped.
The brilliant thing about this, and I think we spoke to this too, is like, it's exposure therapy. And whether you knew you were doing it or not, you did one of the best things you could for yourself. Is as soon as you knew that there was like a real overwhelming fear there, where you were having a post-traumatic stress response, like within your body and your nervous system, is that you exposed yourself to the same scenario enough times and worked through it. And like these brilliant coping mechanisms, like the breathing, and you did one of the healthiest things that you can do. And as much as it sounds like, what do you mean you went on it right afterwards and the accident and all these things, but like you did yourself such a huge therapeutic favor in it. It was like, it's so brilliant in so many ways. Maybe like a little dangerous with your cane and stuff, but that's a bit your style, which I can appreciate. I can appreciate.
Well, that's on brand. It's on brand.
Yeah.
It makes sense that it's a source of therapy, though. I just remember thinking like, holy shit, if it's that bad right now, it's only going to get worse. Like that's what was
You're
going
right.
on in my head.
It would have.
Where
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
the more time I'm off my bike, the worse it's going to be. And now that I've had these experiences, it's just going to be in my head of like, oh God, it's going to get worse. What if I can't do it? What if I can't get back on? And I just remember thinking like, I can't lose this. I can't lose riding. I can't lose this part of my life. And yeah, so.
You said it again, that resolute of like, I cannot lose this. This is not an option. And I think that's just what I absolutely, what we all adore about you is it's always just like, it's never about like, oof, I guess that's not going to work out. It's like, what's the resources? Where do I need to look? How do I need to pivot? How do I need to make this happen? And that's just it. There's always a solution. And I think I've used that or looked towards you for that so often, as, like, somebody to look up to in that way of like, well, it's not an option of like quitting. It's not an option of saying I can't. Mm-hmm. It's just like, where do you pivot? Where do you get resources? How do you figure it out? Period. Like hard stop.
It's like when the fear rises, you're like, what would Kim do? And then you're like, fuck it, I'm doing it.
I would throw my cane in the wind and I'd do it anyways.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's like, you have to give yourself no other option.
Yes.
You just have to.
Yes.
Right? Like if there is an option, if there is an out, then, there's a million excuses. There's a million different ways that you can do it. But if there is no other option, then you just got to figure it out. And whether you figure it out that moment or you figure it out the next day or the next week, you're going to figure it out. But just don't give yourself another option. So,
well, that seems like a great time for
motivation
maintenance.
Oh, you went like EDM.
I went low. Yeah.
I like it.
Real low, real deep today.
So this is just a little tool based on your life experience that you can pass forward for those listening that they could incorporate into their lives to help build their inner resilience.
This is going to sound really funny. I don't know if this is going to come off the wrong way, and it's definitely probably just a me thing, but I do believe that life is never going to hand you something that you can't handle when things are really, really bad. I always think of like how I would feel if one of my friends were going through this. And I, of course, would never wish it on anybody else. And I always think like, if anybody's going to take one for the team, it's going to be me. Like I can do this. And I would never want anybody else to go through this. I don't know why that goes through my head, but it's just like, if it was going to go out to anybody, I'm glad that it was me, because it just gives me the strength to handle it. And I almost feel like I'm just like handling it for us, because I don't know. That sounds really funny.
I don't know. I think that's pretty great. It's like you're tapping into a part of yourself that you know is a strength, which is being a helper and being somebody that alleviates pain. And so when the pain is too much for yourself, if you can tap into a strength and be like, look, if maybe there's somebody up there that divvies these things out, and if I took this, that means someone else isn't going to take it. Like, even if it's not necessarily the truth, it gives you, you're tapping into your own strength. I think that's fucking brilliant. What's your quote, Kimmy?
So this guy, Chuck, he's the author of Fight Club. And I kind of like this one, but it says, "It's so hard to forget pain, but it's even harder to remember sweetness. We have no scar to show for happiness. We learn so little from peace." Just one of those things where, you know, sometimes we only think of the bad things that have happened in our lives. And it's funny because when you actually purposely try to just stop and remember all the good things, we actually did a sound bathing. We did a meditation in the forest with my cold plunge crew the other day. And we were just doing meditation. And one of the things that he said was, as we were breathing, he just said, picture a piece of paper in front of you. And now with every breath, write something that you love about yourself, that you appreciate it. And it was just like, I appreciate, in my head, it was just like, I appreciate my friends. I appreciate my dog. I appreciate my health. I appreciate my body. And you just do it. And you don't stop. You just keep saying all the things that you appreciate. And oh my God, you feel like a warrior when you come out of that. It's pretty incredible.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.